This is the sixth gate, Kamasaka Zen, known as the hands of the Master. This is Dharma talk number 5. It's about the ox herd, the sixth ox herding picture, riding the ox home, and the practice of overcoming the ego. In Zen Buddhism, the 10 ox herding pictures are a series of illustrations that map the progress of a practitioner's journey towards the attainment of Buddhahood or enlightenment. These images are rich in symbolism, and they encapsulate the steps taken to overcome the ego and to realise one's own true nature. So this sixth ox herding picture, known as riding the ox home, it marks a pivotal moment in the journey. It depicts the practitioner having found the ox, of course the ox representing the true self or the awakened mind. And now the practitioner is riding the ox and heading for home. And this image represents a state of integration, where the practitioner has overcome the distractions of the mind and attained a deeper realization of the unity of self and the universe. The sixth ox herding picture, within the context of Zen practice, it particularly relates to the Buddhist practice of overcoming the ego. And by analysing the symbolism and teachings associated with this picture, we can gain insights into how Zen encourages us as practitioners to transcend this ego and to move towards understanding non-duality, where the distinctions between self and other, subject and object, dissolve. Dissolve into oneness. So before delving into the sixth ox herding picture, it's essential to briefly consider the progression of the 10 ox herding pictures as a whole. These images, they chart the spiritual journey. The spiritual journey from initial confusion and ignorance of the self, represented by the ox, through to the final realization of enlightenment and the return to everyday life. Now, the first few pictures illustrate the search for the ox, symbolise the practitioner's quest for their true self or their Buddha nature. Later stages depict the taming and eventually riding the ox. And this represents the practitioner's increasing mastery over the mind, and also the gradual realization of enlightened awareness. And then by the time we reach the sixth picture, the practitioner has already discovered the ox, which symbolizes the true self or nature of mind. And in earlier stages, the ox is elusive. It's difficult to catch, and it's untamable. But in the sixth picture, the practitioner rides the ox, a symbol of integration of the mind with the true self. And this image conveys a sense of balance, harmony, and mastery that represents the end of active striving, the end of active seeking that marks in the earlier stages of the journey. So at the heart of Zen practice is the cultivation of mindfulness and awareness, aimed at overcoming the attachments and the illusions that arise from the ego. In the teachings of the Buddha, the ego is seen as the false sense of self, a construct of the mind that is, it's just based and rooted in desires, fears and attachments, as in the second noble truth of the Buddha. The ego perpetuates the cycle of suffering, which we call samsara, by reinforcing the idea that a separate self, there is a separate self, distinct from others and from the world. And it's this sense of separation, it creates a delusion to prevent us as practitioners from realizing our genuine interconnectedness with all beings and the universe that surrounds us. So in the process of overcoming this ego, it is essential to the practice of Zen. And this 6 ox herding picture provides a powerful metaphor for this transformation. In earlier stages of the ox herding pictures, the practitioner is shown as searching for the ox or the true self, or struggling to tame it. And these images reflects our struggle, our initial struggle with the ego. We all have it. We all have this attachment to seeing things dualistically. It's just dualistic thinking. And the challenge of letting go of this false sense of self. However, by the time the practitioner reaches the 6th picture, they have moved beyond this struggle. And they have begun to reconcile the ego with the true self. And this act of riding the ox symbolizes a wonderful, harmonious relationship between the practitioner and the mind. It's a sign that the practitioner has ceased fighting the ego and has instead learned to ride it, to use it skillfully, without being enslaved by it. So this moment of integration is not about eliminating the ego entirely, but about recognizing its place in the broader context of spiritual practice. The practitioner no longer seeks to escape the ego, but instead rides it with wisdom and understanding. So to fully understand the significance of this 6th picture, we must first consider the symbolism of the ox itself. And it's in the Zen tradition, the ox represents the true self, as I've mentioned, the Buddha nature, or the awakened mind. And it's often depicted as an elusive and wild creature, symbolizing the difficulty of recognizing one's true nature amidst all the distractions and all the attachments of our everyday life. So, The ox is also a metaphor for the mind, which must be tamed. It must be brought under control for us to simply experience true peace and liberation. So it's in this sixth picture that the practitioner is shown, as I said, riding the ox, symbolising the integration of the true self into everyday life. But this image suggests that the practitioner's awakening, it's not a withdrawal from the world, but rather a full participation in it. The ox, once wild and unruly, is now under control. And we as practitioners have learnt to ride it with ease. And this reflects the Zen understanding of enlightenment as not something separate from the world, but rather as something that it permeates and infuses all aspects of life. Riding the ox, it also signifies the dissolution of the ego's dominance. The ego is no longer the primary driver of the practitioner's actions or their decisions. Instead, as practitioners, we have learned to act from a place of inner wisdom and clarity. Now, the ego in this context is no longer seen as an obstacle to our attainment of enlightenment or Buddhahood, but now we can use it as a tool. It's a tool to be used with skill and discernment. So the practitioner's awareness and mindfulness are now fully integrated into their daily actions. And this allows them to live in a state of harmony and balance. Now, I've mentioned so many times that one of the core teachings of Zen is the realization of non-duality. The understanding that there is no fundamental separation between self and others, subject and object, or the individual and the universe. The sixth ox herding picture can be seen as a visual representation of this particular Zen teaching. Because by riding the ox, the practitioner has transcended the dualistic thinking that has characterized earlier stages of the journey. They no longer see themselves as separate from the ox or separate from the world. Instead, they recognize the inherent unity with all things. And it's this realization of non-duality, it's not a conceptual understanding, but it comes through a direct experience of our interconnectedness. And in Zen, this experience is often referred to as satori or kensho, moments of awakening that allow us to see the world as it truly is, free from the distortions of this ego. And the act of riding this ox suggests that the practitioner has moved beyond the dualistic mind, which is constantly dividing into categories of right and wrong, good and bad, self and other. In this state of non-duality, we become fully present in the moment. We begin to see things as they are, without this filter of egoic thought that has been a part of almost our entire existence. So this picture also reflects the concept of wu-wei, or effortless action. By riding the ox with ease, the practitioner exemplifies the ability to act spontaneously, without attachment, and guided by their true nature, rather than their desires and their fears, and by the ego. And this aligns with the Zen principle of what we call just being, where the practitioner simply acts in accordance with the present moment, without trying to control or manipulate outcomes. So in this state, there is no separation between action and being, self and other. All things are experienced as part of the whole. The concept of home in this sixth picture carries a significant weight in the Zen tradition. The term home is not meant to signify a physical place. It's meant to signify, rather, a state of being, an awareness of our own true nature. So the practitioner's return home is a metaphor for returning to the self. But returning to the self not as an individual ego, but as a part of the universal whole. And it represents the end of the search and the beginning of realization. That the true self, it has always been present, and it's just simply been sitting there waiting to be recognized. So this return to home also signifies the integration of the spiritual journey with daily life. We do not leave the world behind upon attaining enlightenment. Rather, we return to the world with a new perspective. This is the essence of the Zen teaching of what we call engaged Buddhism. The idea that enlightenment is not a retreat from the world, but rather a deepening involvement with it. And now, having transcended the ego, we can now engage with the world from a place of wisdom, compassion, and clarity. The sixth ox-herding picture, with its image of the practitioner riding the ox home, it embodies the idea of returning to the world not as a separate self, but as a fully engaged being, free from constraints of the egoic thinking. And it's in this state that we can learn to live and act in harmony with the world, seeing the interconnectedness of all things. And then we start to act from a place of true understanding. So to conclude, This picture represents the key stage in Zen practice, in the Zen journey. Also in the integration of the true self in everyday life. It symbolises the overcoming of the ego, not through rejection or suppression, but through the realisation of its place within the broader context of the attainment of non-duality. And by riding the ox, the practitioner has learned to transcend the dualistic thinking. That separate self from other has attained a direct experience of the interconnectedness of all things. This moment of realization, it's not the end of the journey, but a beginning of a new way of being. A new way of being in the world. And this time it's one that is guided by wisdom, compassion, and an unshakable understanding of our true self, who we truly are. As we say in Zen, who am I? And then it's through this lens of the sixth ox-herding picture we can come to see how Zen practice, it encourages us to overcome the ego, not by fighting it, but by recognizing its impermanence and integrating it into a larger and more expansive reality, or understanding of that reality. And it's in this way that we as practitioners are able to ride the ox home. We can return to our true nature and living in harmony with the world that surrounds us.